nobody's home, so I can film in the kitchen without having social anxiety. So what we're gonna be doing today is, I've got a book called The Palestine. It is by Sammy Tahini and Tara Wigley, and this is a cookbook. And so in part of reviewing this book, because this is a booktube channel, I thought I would make one of the recipes, because one of the many other things that I really enjoy doing is baking, cooking also. So if I end up really enjoying doing this, I might make a series of reviewing cookbooks by cooking a recipe from them, or multiple recipes. I'm also going to be making makluba soon, which just has a recipe for makluba, but it's not my recipe for makluba. So I do have another book of Palestinian recipes, so that recipe might be closer to how I was taught to make makluba. So I might review that book while I make that dish. But today, what I want to make is called Sweet Tahini Rules, or Kubez el Tahini. El Tahini. I don't know how to pronounce things with an Arabic accent. I only know Spanish. So here's the picture. And it says that this makes 10 rolls, so it's not too huge of a recipe. I'm going to put the recipe amounts and all that in the description, and also my own version of the instructions written out, so it'll be a little easier to follow along. You can like take a screenshot of it or something if you want to make your own of these. But I also recommend getting the cookbook or getting it from the library. This one I got from my library. They do have cookbooks at the library. Reading it for yourself, because there's a whole section of sweet treats, which I'm also considering trying, as well as a whole section of pastries, which is from that section, and then many other sections for like your savories and your main dishes and your side dishes and stuff like that. Also, a really cool thing about this cookbook is it has little like profiles of people, places, and dishes. So this one is about cooking in Ada refugee camp Bethlehem. So it talks about this specific person and how she cooks in that situation. And then there's one in here that is about a group of women who get together and make yogurt and other milk products. And so lots of different little profiles like that. That's one of the funnest things about this book. And yeah, a lot about it is what they talk about in this book is the cultural and carrying on of stories, importance of food and recipes, and teaching the next generation how to make these recipes. So the first thing we're going to do is put a teaspoon of sugar, a teaspoon and a half of yeast, which I'm actually running low on yeast, which doesn't usually happen to me. I only bake like 3 times a year. But I have been baking a little extra this year. I only bake bread that requires yeast 3 times a year because it's a lot of work. But I've recently figured out that despite the fact that my grandma taught me to let the dough rise twice, you actually only have to do it once, which makes it take like an hour and a half less. 7.5 teaspoons. How am I supposed to measure? This thing has milliliters, so 100 is that much, which is the same as, looks like 1/3 of a cup. Now these are a lot less sweet than my sweet rolls. This is also a much smaller recipe than my sweet rolls, which means that it will also be a lot less work. And then we stir that around a little bit and wait for the yeast. Actually, it's already starting to smell like bread. We wait for the yeast to activate and sort of start munching on the sugar. So we put that aside. Then it says to grease this bowl with olive oil. Our little public market, we got this little thing which sprays olive oil, which obviously it's not as aerosolized as it would be out of a can because they don't put the aerosolizing agents in there, which means it's a lot more natural. And also, more importantly, We don't have to keep buying cans and then throwing them away, which really bothers my mom and me. Now it wants me to gradually mix flour into our little yeast and milk mixture. But I'm not going to do that. For one, it wants me to have a standing mixer, and I don't have a standing mixer. But also, there's only so many bowls I'm willing to dirty, and yeah. We'll see what happens. But so far, using this method to adjust recipes has never backfired. On me personally. So it's 2 cups of flour and a little bit of salt. And I'm going to add in, I'm a terrible person. I always change recipes, but I'm going to add in half a cup of whole wheat flour because I really don't like eating white flour bread that's entirely white flour. It's like super bad for your blood sugar unless you eat it along with something else, which I would like to be able to just sort of snack on these. And I'm mixing this a little bit up in its powdery form, just on top of the liquid before I mix it into the liquid. And I'm going to do the same with my salt. Now this looks very dry, but I am supposed to, now that I've mixed that in, add 5 tablespoons of butter. And the next step is to add an egg. And although I do have fresh chicken eggs from my neighbor's chickens that lay eggs all over our pasture and yard and stuff, I'm not going to be using one of those. I'm going to use ones from the store because I found they do unfortunately have roosters, and so I found one too many fertilized eggs that way, and I just don't have the patience to deal with that. Imaginary stand mixer to turn it on for like on high for 5 minutes to do the kneading for me, but I'm going to have to knead this by hand, so I'm going to take off my ring. And once I think I've mixed this as much as possible with the spoon, I will get in there with my hands. This is a pretty thick dough. Pretty dry dough, that's the word. Obviously, this is with clean hands. And you can use gloves if you hate the texture of the dough. I personally like the texture of the dough on my hands. Actually, I take that back. Now that it's properly mixed, it's not as dry of a dough as I thought it was. Now, according to legend, the more you knead, the better it will be texture-wise, because you like force the air bubbles out, but also a lot of people want air bubbles in their bread, so I'm kind of confused about that. Basically, I tend to just knead until it's well combined when I make my bread, and don't really care enough to knead it for longer than that. Now, an interesting difference about this is one of the biggest things about my bread recipe is that throughout the process, a big part is trying to keep all the ingredients warm so that it'll be easy for it to rise, because yeast needs like a certain amount of warmness to rise to make the carbon dioxide to make the stuff rise. But this is fairly cool because I was putting in like the egg, and the egg had been refrigerated. I melted the butter, but like this is fairly cool, and like nothing in the instructions so far has told me to like warm it up. So we'll see if it does have any instructions later on for that, or if it just rises while cold. That answers that. It says that once I put it into the greased bowl, it wants me to leave it in a warm place.
I guess I'll turn the oven on because that's what I do with my other bread when it's ready to rise.
So I ended up figuring out that my oven has a proofing / raising setting for the oven as a whole, not just the drawer underneath. So that's what I used. And our thing raised successfully. For somebody I thought was my savior, you sure make me do a whole lot of labor. So, we've got our raised dough. What we're gonna do is squish it down. And it's boiling enough, it's not sticking, but I'm gonna flour my surface anyway. Shouldn't have to be too big of a surface because it's just a little bit of dough. It's just a little bit. So, a few days ago, I posted an announcement for a giveaway that I'm doing. It is to support a particular family from Operation Olive Branch who has a kid with osteomalacia. That's where your bones don't have enough minerals, so they start sort of what's the word? Mineralizing? That's bad. Very easily treatable if you have access to vitamins, which obviously they do not. Because Operation Olive Branch is all about promoting, spreading awareness of GoFundMes for people who are trying to get out of Gaza. Having to basically pay off the Egyptian government to get people out, about $5,000 to $10,000 per person. As they are running away from the continuing invasion of the last city in Gaza that hasn't been ground invaded, that is now being ground invaded, Rafah. And so my giveaway, I'll link the video below. It explains all of the prizes you could win. I'm going to pick one winner and give them multiple prizes if we reach certain different goals. So like at $5 and $10, I'm going to be sending out earrings to the one person. Then at $20, I'm going to be sending out a plushie. They get to pick from a range of like 6 plushies and like 10 pairs of earrings. And then they also, if we reach $50, they get to choose one of a few original watercolor paintings that I put in that video. So if you have the means to donate, you can win a little prize. So now comes the tahini. This is basically like a cinnamon roll, but with tahini instead of butter mixed with the sugar and cinnamon. Which tahini is made from sesame seeds. And it is a common ingredient, or what are they called? Condiment in Palestine and other Arab countries. And it tastes fairly nutty, so it's a little like peanut butter, but a little different. And it says you're supposed to sort of drizzle it and then spread it out so it's even. So this stuff's a little cold, so it might not spread as thinly. And then leave a little around the edge blank so that you can melt it together once you've rolled it, and then it will seal properly. Then you take half a cup of sugar and some cinnamon, a teaspoon of cinnamon. Wow, that's quite a lot of sugar for that amount of dough. Okay, and then you sprinkle it like this. Are you sure it's half a cup? Jeez, okay. I guess that makes up for the non-sweetness of the dough itself. The filling is just really sugary. I don't even think I can put the rest on there without it just spilling and making a mess. Cinnamon. Okay, and then we're supposed to let it sit for a while so that the tahini sort of soaks into the sugar. So I'll be back momentarily. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes. The recipe says to line a, what's it called, baking sheet with parchment paper. I'm doing it this little guy because he's
you can put him in the dishwasher. And rather than parchment paper, this is what I do with my cakes. I put down oil and then do just regular wax paper and then more oil on top of that. And I'm using olive oil in this case, though it is not my favorite oil, because that's like the oil that goes with this pastry. So we're gonna roll it up like it's a cinnamon roll. And I go pinchy, 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 pinch. We're gonna slide this guy under it so that we can cut without hurting the counter. And you can trim the ends if you want so that they're a little neater, and I'm going to do that because I want to have some presentable tahini rolls. And then it wants them to be about 1.75 inches long. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, I've made them a little big because the recipe says they're supposed to be 10 of them. I've preheated the oven to 350. Bonk. With a little bit of space between, because they're going to get bigger in the oven. Now, sometimes you let it raise after you shape it when you make bread, but this recipe doesn't say to do that. So I'm going to just put it in the oven. Also, it wants me to brush these with egg yolk and then put sesame seeds on them. I don't have any sesame seeds, so we're skipping that step. I didn't figure it was worth buying a whole bunch of them and then only using it in one recipe. Alright, I'll come back to you when these have been cooked. This is them out of the oven. They're looking like pretty regular cinnamon rolls. But I'm going to try one of my little cut off ends and see if they taste like tahini. I like it. I haven't had much tahini before. It's definitely interesting. It definitely is a tinge of bitterness to it. Not as bad as like other bitter things I've had. Just a little bitty tinge. But I was reading in the cookbook, there's a profile on a person who makes tahini, like that's his whole thing he does. And apparently Western made or outside of Arab countries made tahini is apparently more likely to be bitter because of the way it's made. And there's like a specific way to grind the sesame seeds, even though you don't do any other ingredients. A specific way and temperature and slowness of grinding the tahini that makes it richer and excludes the bitterness or stops the bitterness from happening. So that's really interesting, and it would be very interesting to try this with tahini made in an Arab country. Next recipe I'm thinking of doing is these. They're called pistachio harissa, and they're like a really rich cake that you then soak in a syrup. So that could be tasty. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Remember, if you are on here before May 2nd, do check out the giveaway. Link below.